Hello everyone and welcome to my Soap Twist 24 channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. In the sun-drenched world of Los Angeles, where beauty and secrets intertwine like vines climbing the hillsides, the Forrester family and their extended circle have always lived on the verge of disaster and victory. Lives are reconstructed with the same precision as the couture garments that glide down their runways, but underneath the gleaming surfaces, darker currents flow deep. Nobody in the extensive network of mansions, beach cottages, and business offices thinks Dylan, the quiet, seemingly unassuming young woman who came out of nowhere, is hiding a heartbreaking secret. She is at the core of a horrible death that has impacted so many people's lives, but her role is masked by pity and artfully created vulnerability. Dylan first gained notoriety when she admitted to being the motorist who hit Luna Nozawa that fateful night. Luna, a brilliant young woman mired in her own web of blunders and intrigues, had fled from prison in a desperate attempt to find freedom or forgiveness. She dashed into the path of an approaching car, and the impact killed her in an instant. The announcement struck shockwaves through the Forrester and Spencer households. Electra Forrester, who was kind-hearted and trusting, had grown close to Luna in ways that confused everything. While Spencer, torn between loyalties and budding loves, felt guilty for not doing more to help someone who previously meant something to him. Steffy Forrester, ever the defender of her family's history, saw the episode as another chapter in the never-ending cycle of catastrophe that seemed to follow some people into their orbit. Dylan arrived at the Forrester mansion with her eyes downcast and her voice cracking, recounting the moment in excruciating detail. The rain-slick road, the unexpected figure darting out, the sickening thump, and the panic that ensued. She had initially fled the scene in panic, she explained, overcome by the horror of what had occurred. As a poor art teacher living on the streets, she lacked resources and had no one to turn to. The confession came after anonymous texts started bothering Electra, implying the truth. Dylan's appearance appeared to be an act of courage, a willingness to accept the consequences so that others could find closure. The family, moved by her remorse and obvious difficulties, showed sympathy rather than censure. Steffy even contemplated hiring her, recognizing the potential in her creative background. Will welcomed her to remain with him temporarily, providing her with refuge when she was in need. Electra hugged her, tears in her eyes, grateful for her candor, which allowed everyone to go on. However, underlying that veneer of sorrow lies a truth so explosive that its disclosure will break alliances and reveal reasons no one has yet uncovered. Nobody believes Dylan planned the events that led to Luna's death with eerie precision. The hit and run was not an accident. It was the climax of a plot fueled by hatred, jealousy, and a desperate need to rewrite her own story. Dylan had been watching Luna from the shadows for longer than anyone knew. Their paths had crossed unexpectedly, possibly through shared circles of struggling artists or brief contacts in the city's underbelly, where aspirations die. Luna's life, full with drama and second chances, embodied everything Dylan felt denied. While Luna became embroiled in drama with wealthy families, getting attention and sympathy, Dylan languished in obscurity, her abilities unnoticed and opportunities snatched away. The catastrophe occurred with malicious intent. Dylan had discovered Luna's escape after monitoring her whereabouts through rumors and chance sightings. She positioned herself on that lonely stretch of road, headlights dimmed, engine idling. When Luna came, frantic and disoriented, Dylan accelerated just enough to guarantee the outcome. The act was quick, cruel, and well-timed to resemble tragedy. Dylan then departed into the night, leaving no trace of her whereabouts. She waited, patient as a predator, until it was proper to reveal her confession. By claiming responsibility as an unsuspecting participant, she avoided scrutiny while portraying herself as a victim of circumstances. The tears were sincere, emotions of relief that her risk had paid off. Dylan now moves cautiously across the Forrester world's outskirts. She sits in Will's apartment, listening to his stories of familial demands and romantic turmoil, and offers soothing guidance that brings him closer. Her laughing is sweet, and her stare lasts just long enough to pique interest without alarm. Electra considers her a friend, someone who knows grief and the fight to recover. R.J. Forrester, with his artistic soul, is attracted by her sketches and quiet passion. Even Ivy Forrester, who is suspicious by nature, has focused her ire on shielding Electra from potential romantic threats rather than delving deeper into Dylan's history. The family's attention is divided. Weddings are arranged, rivalries are revived, and corporate battles are fought, leaving little time to scrutinize the newcomer, who appears to be appreciative for their generosity. Dylan's mind, however, never rests. She recalls the collision in calm moments, the sound resonating like a distant drum. Guilt flickers periodically, but it is swamped by the pleasure of being close to power. She has traded anonymity for access and sympathy, which protects her. Every grin she receives from Will feels like a victory taken from Luna's grave. Every chance presented by Steffi represents the life Luna once desired, but never fully realized. Dylan tells herself that murder was necessary since Luna's carelessness would eventually damage more lives. In her rationalizations, she becomes a tool of justice, balancing scales that the Forrestos and Spencers would never notice. As the days go into weeks, small flaws show in the illusion. When prodded for details about the night, she hesitated in telling her account. When Luna's name is repeated in regretful tones, there is a brief sense of happiness. Ivy's instincts kick up when she notices Dylan getting too close to Will, but she chalks it up to flirtation rather than anything sinister. Electra confides in Dylan about her concerns and hopes, unaware that the confidant's goals are far darker than simply affection. RJ's rising interest provides another thread to weave into her deceptive tapestry. The metropolis pulses around them, oblivious to the mysteries hidden behind its glitter. Paparazzi take photos at parties, headlines speculate about relationships and rivalries, but no one notices the calm woman in the background. She attends meetings with borrowed confidence, dressed by sympathetic friends, and her presence is normalized. Conversations revolve around forgiveness, second chances, and the human spirit's resiliency. Dylan nods, whispering agreements, while internally calculating how far she can go before the mask slips. Dylan glances at reflections in mirrors during peaceful hours, alone in borrowed rooms, wondering how long the masquerade can go on for. She has no great plan beyond survival and advancement. The awful death she caused was a doorway, and she walked through it without hesitation. The Forrestos' unending cycles of love and betrayal provide ideal camouflage. Nobody suspects because no one wants to. Suspicion would shatter the fragile peace they hold onto, the idea that kindness triumphs. However, shadows lengthen. Whispers of skepticism start in corners. An unanswered text message, an overly sharp gaze, a misaligned detail. Dylan can feel the pressure growing, which is slight but insistent. She adapts by deflecting with sensitivity and redirecting with charm. The web tightens, yet she remains at the core, invisible as the architect. Dylan is the epitome of deception in a world where beauty conceals savagery. She weeps openly for Luna, while quietly loving the hush that comes after her name. She accepts assistance while planning to claim more. Nobody suspects because the truth is too horrific to consider. A stranger, greeted with courtesy, hides the heart of a murderer. The days are filled with fashion shoots, family dinners, beach trips, and whispered confessions. Dylan glides past them like a ghost in plain sight, her secret throbbing beneath each encounter. The sad death lingers in memory, a wound that refuses to heal completely, but the exact cause remains unknown. She listens to future goals, offers support, and awaits the next opportunity to consolidate her position. Dylan stands on a balcony one evening as the sun sets over the Pacific, throwing golden light across the city. The wind conveys aromas of salt and jasmine. Below, lives continue in their intricate patterns, lovers fighting, designers doodling, empires rising and dying. She recalls Luna's final moments, the dread in her eyes, the gravity of the impact. She feels a tingle of exhilaration rather than guilt. She has rewritten fate, entering a story that was never meant for her. Nobody suspects. Not yet. Her most powerful tool is her ignorance. The story of deception progresses slowly, with each day adding layers to the illusion. Dylan learns the household rhythms and the elite's unstated rules. She reflects their politeness and reserved friendliness. When Will expresses his uncertainties, Jane listens with real empathy. Dylan nods as Electra discusses her goals of love and stability, disguising the envy that used to drive her acts. She doodles designs in notebooks that capture RJ's attention, garnering praise that fuels her drive. Steffi offers a possible internship, which causes Dylan's heart to race. Each minor win pushes her farther into the fold. However, memories invade. Luna's expression in Headlights. The sound of metal against flesh. The quiet that followed. Dylan pushes them down, concentrating on the present. She tells herself that the objective justifies the means, that survival requires sacrifice. Dylan moves cautiously as tensions escalate as a result of Ivy's interference. She feigns pain, retreats when required, and emerges stronger. The family sees strife between women over a man rather than the shadow of murder. The tragedy remains unresolved in its most profound sense. The death is lamented, but the motivation for it remains unknown. Dylan stalks among them, a wolf in borrowed wool, waiting for the time when suspicion will turn her way. Until then, she smiles, consoles, and plans. Nobody suspects that the calm newcomer, whom they pity and protect, is the cause of their ongoing grief. In the glittering pandemonium of the bold and the beautiful, reality is hidden in plain sight, wrapped in layers of denial and desire. The shock did not occur all at once. It came in stealthily, disguised as grief, bewilderment, and unresolved questions, engulfing everyone at Forrester like a fog that refused to clear. A sad death had devastated the family to its core, and while suspicions were passed from one person to the next, no one, not even those closest to the truth, thought about Dylan. He stood in the background, quiet and seemed sad, playing his part so effectively that he occasionally believed it. In the days following the death, the mood was oppressive. Conversations were quiet, eyes were red from restless nights, and each room felt the weight of what had been lost. The victim had been an integral part of their life, and their absence was impossible to bear. Tears flowed readily, rage followed quickly, and the want for someone to blame became stronger by the hour. Dylan mourned in the same way that everyone else. He attended every event, expressed condolences with rehearsed sincerity, and spoke about the departed with veneration, making him appear above suspicion. His anguish appeared real, his voice breaking at the appropriate times, his eyes watery but never giving too much. To everyone watching, he was just another devastated soul attempting to make sense of an unfathomable catastrophe. What no one knew was that Dylan had been awake for nights on end, repeating every event leading up to his death. He remembered the argument, the words that had gotten out of hand, the wrath he couldn't manage, the single second when everything changed. It had not been planned. That was the concept he clung to, the explanation he told himself when the guilt threatened to overwhelm him. He persuaded himself it was an accident. A catastrophic and irrevocable accident. The difficulty was that accidents continue to have consequences. At Forrester Creations, business continued as usual, but the loss lingered in every meeting and hallway. Some claimed the tragedy was caused by long-standing rivalry. Others whispered about betrayal and secrets that had eventually turned lethal. Names were casually passed around, hypotheses were built and deconstructed over coffee and late-night phone calls. Dylan listened to everything, nodding where appropriate, and occasionally offering his own carefully chosen speculation to divert focus away from himself. He got adept at deflecting suspicion. A subtle remark here and an innocent question there. He never accused anyone directly, but he knew how to create doubt. And it worked. Slowly, the attention turned to persons with apparent intentions, people whose tempers or backgrounds made them easy targets. Dylan watched as friendships strained and accusations shattered already fragile ties, while his own secret remained hidden. Privately, he was unraveling. Each sound frightened him. Every knock on the door made his heart race. Dylan felt physically uncomfortable after the police indicated that certain portions of the inquiry will be reopened. He smiled, of course. He expressed pleasure that the truth would be revealed, unaware of how ironic his words were even to himself. Sleep became his nemesis. When he finally did fall asleep, dreams shook him awake, distorted and unrelenting visions of that same moment. Sometimes the victim's face appeared dejected rather than angry, which hurt worse. Dylan would wake up soaked in sweat and gasping, his guilt shouting louder than ever. Those closest to him began to detect changes. He was more withdrawn and irritated. He reacted over minor issues, then apologized too fast and hastily. They attributed it to grief, and Dylan allowed them. Grief was a convenient cover, allowing him to justify practically everything. One guy, however, got closer than the others. Dylan had not expected some of the questions, small irregularities that didn't add together. A time frame that was somewhat off. Dylan mentioned a detail and then refuted it later. He always managed to smooth things over, but the pressure was building. He could feel the walls closing in and the space to breathe shrinking. What disturbed him most was the idea that when the individual died, a part of him felt relieved. I was relieved that the argument had ended. Relief that certain secrets would never be revealed. This notion alone made him feel monstrous. He was not only guilty of causing a death, but also of benefiting from it. As the days passed into weeks, the investigation became more intense. Emotions ran high, and the family was tested to the limit. Accusations flew openly, no longer whispered. Tears turned into yelling matches. Long-held grudges returned with a vengeance. Dylan sat in the heart of it all, watching the turmoil erupt and knowing he was the spark that started the fire. He promised himself he'd confess. He mentally rehearsed it 100 times, imagining their expressions, the betrayal, and the agony. In some accounts, he was absolved. Others threw him out totally. He was well aware that reality would very certainly be much worse. Fear kept him silent, even though his conscience implored him to do the right thing. The irony was awful. Everyone trusted him. They leaned on him for support and thanked him for his strength during such a difficult moment. Each phrase of thankfulness felt like a knife being pushed deeper into his chest. He had become the custodian of a massive untruth that threatened to engulf him completely. There were times when he nearly slipped. A conversation would go too close to the truth, and he would feel a confession rise in his throat. But then someone would say something that reminded him of what he was about to lose, his freedom, his reputation, whatever love he still had, and the words died before they could be spoken. Dylan, more than everyone else, had been transformed by the catastrophe. The man who once thought he knew himself suddenly saw a stranger in the mirror. He witnessed someone who could do terrible things, deceive so easily, and live with blood on his hands while smiling at those he cared about. Nevertheless, no one suspected him. As time went, the case became cooler. Leads have dried up. Attention switched to fresh dramas and scandals, as it always does. The death was just another terrible chapter in a long history of loss. Dylan should have been relieved. Instead, the silence felt heavier than the scrutiny ever did. Because secrets do not remain buried forever. Dylan knew deep down that the truth would eventually surface, through remorse, chance, or the one mistake he hadn't made yet. Until then, he would continue to pretend, grieve, and live in the shadow of his actions. The world witnessed a broken man dealing with loss. Only Dylan understood. He was living with the knowledge that the tragedy everyone mourned was one he had caused, and that the cost of his silence would be paid eventually.